Unwittingly became a father figure to my neighbor's son. Now we're headed for a date that could redefine everything. 3 years ago, a woman named Cassie, 32F, and her son Kenny, 13 meters, moved into the apartment next door to mine. I was 31 at the time, working as a mechanic, and when I saw them struggling with a few boxes, I figured I'd offer a hand just to get off on the right foot. Among their belongings, I noticed Kenny's PS4 and casually mentioned that I game too, offering him an open invitation to come over and try out my PS5, Switch, or PC, as long as his mom was okay with it. I also let Cassie know that I was happy to help out if she ever had car trouble. After all, half the people on our floor came to me for car advice at some point or another. Cassie thanked me, and though we didn't interact much beyond a friendly hey in the hallway at first, that changed about a month after they moved in. One evening, Cassie knocked on my door, her car wouldn't start, and she needed another mechanic's set of eyes on the problem. Turned out she just needed new spark plugs, an easy fix for me. Cassie was grateful, offered to pay me, but I waved her off. Instead, she insisted that I join her and Kenny for dinner the next day to repay the favor. I was hesitant at first, but she wouldn't take no for an answer, so the next evening I joined them. It turned out to be a great night. I got to know her better, had some real conversations with Kenny, and realized what a good kid he was. He was passionate about gaming, loved science, and played the guitar. The three of us ended up at my place afterward for stormy rounds of Mario Kart. That night kind of set the tone for everything that came after. Kenny started coming over almost every day to play games, and I found myself teaching him how to work on cars, taking him to my shop, showing him new tools. He was a quick learner, and pretty soon he told Cassie he wanted to be a mechanic just like me. I told him to aim even higher, maybe consider becoming an engineer. Now he's seriously looking into engineering programs, and it genuinely makes me proud. Cassie seemed to appreciate my relationship with her son. She became a lot warmer, more open with me. Things took a turn during lockdown when I ended up getting COVID. Cassie stepped up in a way I never expected. She delivered groceries, cleaned my apartment, and took care of me despite all the chaos that COVID brought. That act of kindness left a real mark on me. Pretty soon, it became routine for her to cook me dinner every night, and all three of us would sit down to eat together. Even when I worked late, she'd make sure to leave dinner in my apartment. The other day, Kenny had a friend over, and as they went into his apartment I heard the friend ask about me. Kenny casually introduced me, saying, "This is Op, he's like my dad." That floored me. I always just thought of Kenny as my little brother, not someone who'd see me as a father figure. I asked Cassie about it and she seemed genuinely surprised by my reaction. She assured me that she'd never pushed that role on me, but admitted that Kenny truly did think of me as a dad, and, in fact, really hoped Cassie and I would end up together to become a real family. Cassie quietly confessed she wouldn't mind that, either. The way she said it, with a shy smile, made my heart skip. I asked her outright if she was asking me on a date, and when she grinned and said yes, all I could do was say okay, even though I was suddenly as nervous as I'd ever been. We've got a dinner date set for this weekend, and honestly, I'm terrified of messing things up, either with Cassie or with Kenny. I really do love them both, but the prospect of being a father figure for Kenny weighs on me. That's a big responsibility, and I don't know if I'm ready or even worthy of it. And Cassie, she's amazing. I just hope I can measure up to what she and Kenny need. Update 1. People kept asking if I'm actually attracted to Cassie, and the answer is a resounding yes. Cassie is honestly one of the strongest, kindest, most considerate people I've ever known. She's always putting others first, sometimes to a fault, and for years I wish someone would make her a priority the way she deserves. And honestly, Cassie is beautiful. I just never let myself believe she'd ever think of me that way, or find me attractive as more than a friend. All week leading up to our date, my nerves were off the charts. During our regular family dinners, I caught Cassie smiling at me more, lingering on little glances, though I'm pretty sure Kenny, her 13-year-old, was too absorbed in his phone to notice anything going on between us. Cassie, in her subtle but not so subtle way, suggested to Kenny that he might want to spend the weekend at his grandparents' place. He wasn't too keen at first, but she all but packed his bag and pushed him out the door, which had me grinning. Saturday evening, I showed up at her door, and when she opened it, I nearly lost my words. She was standing there in this stunning dress. I broke the ice by teasingly asking if the dress was for me, and she laughed, which took the edge off. As we headed out, things felt a bit awkward. Those first date jitters were real, but everything shifted when we were walking to the restaurant and she slipped her hand into mine and gave me the sweetest smile. Just like that, every ounce of awkwardness melted away. The rest of the evening was honestly perfect. We talked, laughed, and lingered over dinner. At one point, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked her what had changed for her, what made her see me differently. She told me it all started during the previous Christmas. Cassie works relentlessly as a single mom, and she makes sure Kenny never goes without. But, like any parent, she wants to give him the world, and sometimes she just can't make it stretch far enough. That Christmas, Kenny had his heart set on a PS5, but it just wasn't possible for her. Seeing her struggle tugged at me, so with a little extra disposable income, I made it my mission to find one. I hunted for months, tracking every stock drop until I finally got my hands on one. When Christmas came, I surprised Kenny with it and told him it was from his mom. Cassie was stunned. She started crying while Kenny was losing his mind with excitement. She kept thanking me over and over. That, she confessed, was the moment she realized she wanted me in their lives for good. She tried to brush off those feelings, deny them, but she just couldn't. The conversation we had a few days ago gave her the opening she needed to finally tell me how she felt. After dinner we went back to her place for a drink. We sat together and had a long talk about what we both wanted and expected from a relationship. We agreed to be exclusive, to take things slow, and most importantly, not to tell Kenny until we know for sure this is real. We don't want to set him up for disappointment if things don't work out. She also apologized for calling me dad in front of him that one time, admitting it was a bit of wishful thinking on her end and that it was probably a bit much. Cassie told me I could choose whatever role I was comfortable with in Kenny's life, but she hoped that someday, I could see him as my own son. Sorry to disappoint anyone expecting fireworks that night, but I'll be honest, we didn't cross that line. It felt like too much, too soon. But we did have a buzzed, giggly makeout session that night. The next day, we went for brunch together, and on a whim, decided to go apple picking. Walking hand in hand, being silly, taking photos, it all felt incredible. Fast forward to last night's family dinner, and Cassie sat closer than usual, even finding little ways to touch me, her foot sliding up my leg under the table. I don't think I've ever been more turned on in my life. To tell the truth, I'm falling for Cassie, and I'm falling hard. We're together now, and my whole heart hopes it lasts. I can't imagine wanting anyone else. She's everything I could possibly want, and all I want is to be worthy of her. Cassie really is something special. Update 2. Believe me, I'm no choir boy and I would absolutely love to take Cassie to Pound Town. But I want to respect her and not give off the impression that I'm only in it for the sex. Taking things slow means I can't just run around like a horny teenager, not that the thought hasn't crossed my mind. Still, I can definitely say things are progressing, and we seem to cross little milestones almost every day. We're on our way towards the big ones, and though it's way too early for the L word, I honestly don't know how to describe what's growing between us as anything other than that. Since people seem to enjoy hearing about us, here's a small update. We spent Thanksgiving with her parents. Her mother has always liked me, probably our biggest supporter since day one. The second we arrived, she instantly picked up on the change between me and Cassie. I guess it was the way we kept looking at each other, maybe just our energy in the room. Women have a sixth sense for that kind of thing, I swear. At some point, her mom pulled us aside and asked straight out if we were together. We tried denying it, but she just gave us the classic come on, I know look. Eventually, we caved and admitted it. She hugged me so hard I thought she might crack a rib, and she couldn't stop grinning for the rest of the night. Things got a little interesting at dinner. While I was sitting there, having a normal conversation with her dad, Cassie started rubbing her feet up and down my legs, not subtle at all. I must have stuttered half a dozen times. Her dad, giving me a suspicious sideways glance, asked if I was all right. All I could muster was that I had a bad case of heartburn, trying my best not to give away what was really going on. Honestly, it felt like I was in high school all over again, except this whole thing is so much newer, more dangerous, and kind of thrilling. Like we're doing something almost forbidden. As for Kenny, he's still blissfully oblivious. We've been working on restoring an old car together, a project that's kept him occupied and his mind off of anything else. He's wrapped up in his own world of crushes right now anyway. Today at work, I felt like a grinning idiot, pacing around trying to get rid of this nervous, excited energy. I work as a mechanic, and just when I thought I'd messed something up, my boss called me into his office. I expected a lecture, but instead he had this massive bouquet of roses sitting on his desk. He looked me in the eye and said, "This is for you." I was totally confused, but then I saw the card, just because, love GF. I could barely hold it together. My boss started laughing, saying I'd found a good one and not to screw it up. Sure, he threatened to give me some hell for it, standard shop banter, but he was genuinely happy for me. Of course, the guys on the floor tore into me when word got out, but honestly, I didn't care. I felt like I was floating all day. Now I'm sitting here on my break, completely thrown off by how much this surprised me. I can't stop replaying everything in my head. I keep catching myself daydreaming, and honestly, I need someone to talk me down from running out to buy her a ring today. Edit, now I'm finally off work, still flustered, but a little calmer. I don't think I'll be getting her a ring tonight, but I've got to do something. She deserves the absolute best, and now I'm racking my brain to figure out something that would even come close to what she did for me today. Update 3. After that little stunt Cassie pulled, I realized it was finally time to stop waiting and make Cassie an honest woman. I'd been telling myself I'd do it after we closed on a house, but deep down, I knew that was just an excuse I kept clinging to. So, without telling Cassie, I went to talk to her parents about my plan to propose to her. The moment I told them, her mom was absolutely ecstatic. She practically jumped through the roof. She immediately shifted into planning mode, brainstorming ideas about the perfect way to propose, asking about kinds of rings, all the tiny details. Honestly, it was hard to tell who was more excited, her or me. It was hilarious, because after Cassie surprised me with those roses, she noticed how giddy I was. I could see she was genuinely happy that I liked them, but right away she tried to rein me in. She told me not to do anything stupid, her eyes playful but a little suspicious. Little did she know what was brewing in my mind. In the end, I planned the perfect little getaway for us over Memorial Day weekend, just the two of us at a lake house. Update 4. So, about that lake house plan. I did one thing before we left that I didn't tell Cassie about. I pulled Kenny aside while she was packing up the cooler and asked if I could talk to him in the hallway. I swear my hands were shaking more than they did the entire weekend. I told him I wanted to ask his mom to marry me and asked if I had his blessing. He just stared at me for a second, dead serious, then he grinned so hard I thought his face might crack. He said, finally, like I'd kept him waiting years, and then he hugged me. 13-year-old boy, full-on hug. He looked me in the eye and made me promise I'd never leave her or him hanging, and I told him straight that I've got no plans to leave either of them, ever. He went back inside, pretending like nothing was up, but as I was heading out he slipped something into my hand, a folded post-it with a doodle of the three of us under a little roof and the words "Don't chicken out." I stuck it in my wallet and carried it the whole time. The lake place was this small, creaky A-frame with a dock that looked charming in photos and slightly haunted in person. We got there in the late afternoon, and everything just settled into this easy rhythm. She put on a playlist, we cooked together, her giving me grief about my criminally large garlic cuts, and we ate on the deck watching the light slide down the trees. I could feel the ring burning a hole in my pocket, and every time she smiled at me I thought, this is it, do it now, and then, my heart would pound and I'd chicken out. I'd planned it for sunset. There's a little hand rowboat tied to the dock, the kind that creaks like a movie prop and has paint flaking off in charming, probably lead-based curls. I told her I wanted to go out for a spin. She kicked off her sandals, grabbed a blanket, and we paddled out just far enough that the shore noise became this softened hush, like the world got muted. The sky turned that molten pink and the water looked like it was breathing. I reached into my jacket, because yes, I'm the idiot rowing in a jacket in May, and the ring box was not where I thought I left it. Cue my soul leaving my body. For a full 5 seconds I was convinced I'd left it on the kitchen counter in plain sight. I patted everything like a TSA agent and finally felt the box jammed beneath the inside seam. When I pulled it free, I tried to play it cool, but the boat rocked and the box shot out of my fingers, bounced off the bench and hit the floorboards. Cassie clutched the sides and said, "What are you doing?" And I muttered something real smooth like, "Nothing," while my heart tried to escape out my throat. The box slid toward a knothole by the keel. I swear time slowed down. I dove for it, missed, and caught it on the second bounce with my fingertips. The boat did a dramatic sway and scooped a neat tablespoon of lake water over the edge and straight into my shoe. I was kneeling in a half puddle, soaked sock, trying to steady my voice. She had her hand over her mouth, eyes already glassy, like maybe she knew. I opened the box, and it was like the world snapped into this tunnel. I told her I loved her. I told her she'd been my home for a long time, that I didn't want to spend another day being anything but hers, and that I wanted to be there for Kenny for every stupid school science fair, every bad band practice, all of it. I told her I'd mess up and say the wrong things sometimes and get grease on the good towels, but I'd always show up. Then I asked her to marry me. She didn't answer at first. She made this small sound and then started crying in that choked, surprised way that makes your chest hurt just hearing it. She nodded before she could get the word out, then finally said yes, a bunch of times, laughing and crying, and I barely got the ring on her finger because my hands were shaking so hard. We hugged and the boat did another dramatic sway and my knee went through one of the slats. I went down to my thigh and she almost fell forward, which just made us laugh harder. So there I was, legs stuck in a boat, socks squishing, engaged to the love of my life while she wiped her tears on my shoulder and told me I was an idiot for scaring her. We rode back in the dark with the lantern on, her hand on my knee, both of us just giddy. Back at the cabin, she called her mom from the porch. I heard a scream through the phone that probably woke up half the lake. Her mom was sobbing and laughing, her dad yelled congrats from somewhere in the background, and Cassie looked at me like I'd hung the moon. Later, by candlelight with the power flickering because the place was old and wind kept doing something to the lines, we danced to a static-filled slow song and I can't really describe that feeling other than the safest I've ever felt. I'm not going to give a play-by-play of the rest of the night, but I'll say the floorboards creaked, the lantern burned low, and I've never been more certain in my life about anything. We slept in. Woke up to lake light and bedhead and the tiniest fog outside. I made coffee that tasted like campfire and mud, and she sat at the little table turning her hand over and over, like she was still convincing herself it was real. We took a photo on the dock with her holding her hand out to the camera, both of us in hoodies, hair a mess, me with one pant leg rolled because the knee I'd put through the boat left a splinter, the size of a small steak. It's not Instagram pretty, but it's my favorite picture. On the drive back we stopped at a roadside stand for strawberries that were so ripe the bottoms were bleeding juice through the basket. Cassie kept reaching across the console and touching my arm, like she needed to check if I was actually there. At a gas station she bought a stupid little air freshener shaped like a heart and hung it on my rear view. The truck now smells like romantic cherry chemical, and I don't care. We agreed we wanted to tell Kenny together, in person. We got back to our floor and I told her I'd run to my place to drop our bags. When we walked into her apartment, I froze. There were streamers. There were balloons. There was a cake on the counter that said finally. In blue frosting. Kenny stood there with two champagne flutes filled with sparkling cider like a tiny maitre d'. He looked at Cassie's hand, saw the ring, and just launched himself at us. If I thought his hallway hug was big, this one almost took me down. He was laughing and saying, I knew it, and her parents were on FaceTime propped up against the toaster yelling congratulations from the phone speaker. Her mom had broken any kind of secrecy the second Cassie called from the porch, then sent Kenny to the store with her dad for balloons. Kenny asked if he could tell his friend group and we told him yes, and they FaceTimed immediately, all these little heads popping into the frame cheering. At one point he got serious, pulled me into a hug again, and asked if he could start calling me dad for real. I told him he could call me whatever he wanted, that I wasn't going anywhere. He nodded like he'd been waiting to hear those exact words. That night, we did family dinner and it felt different in this pure, solid way. My fork was barely in my hand before it was out again because Cassie kept grabbing my left hand just to thumb over the ring she put on me. Nothing fancy, a simple band we picked up together on the way home from the lake because she said if she had a ring, I should have one too. She kept doing these little looks across the table and Kenny would roll his eyes so hard he'd almost fall out of his chair. We told him we'd like to start looking for a place with a yard. He immediately demanded a dog, a workbench in the garage, and a corner for his guitar stuff. We said yes to the workbench and the guitar corner and played it cool on the dog, but between you and me, I'm already looking at rescues. Monday, I was back at the shop for about 10 minutes before my phone rang. A realtor. We'd put an offer in on a little 3-bedroom with a detached garage a week earlier, the kind of house you can tell was loved, just tired, peeling paint, a crooked porch swing, and a blueberry bush trying to take over the back fence. They accepted. I walked out behind the bays, called Cassie, and when she picked up, I didn't even say hello. I said, start packing. She screamed, then I screamed, then my boss came outside thinking someone had lost a limb. When I told him, the guys in the shop started banging on panels with ratchets like it was a drumline. I don't embarrass easy, but I had to duck my head and rub my eyes for a second. We drove by the house that night as the sun went down, just sat in the truck and stared at it. Kenny mapped out where his desk was going to go, where he'd put his posters, asked if he could plant sunflowers because some girl in his science class said bees like them. Cassie leaned into me and said, "Can you believe this?" I told her I could, because I do. The garage is big enough for the project car and a lift, and there's a little shed out back that Kenny's already claimed as a studio-like. He's going to be recording his debut album next summer. There was one more thing. When we got home that night, I remembered the post-it Kenny gave me. I pulled it from my wallet and handed it to him. He read it, looked at me and said, "You didn't chicken out." He tucked it into the corner of a photo on their fridge under a magnet shaped like a tomato. Then he grabbed my hand and dragged me to the couch to help him price out break lines. It's funny how normal keeps going even when everything changes. We're engaged. We have a house under contract. Dinner still gets burned sometimes and laundry still piles up. I'm still the idiot who almost fed a diamond to a lake. But she's wearing my ring, I'm wearing hers, and Kenny is already lobbying for Friday movie nights in our living room. I keep catching myself grinning at nothing. I keep thinking about that doc, her yes, the way she said it like she'd been holding it in for a long time. I've never felt more sure. Update 5. We closed on the house a week ago and the key the seller handed me was attached to a keychain shaped like a ceramic rooster in a tiny cowboy hat. It clicked into the front door and the deadbolt turned with that satisfying clunk that sounds like a promise. Cassie cried before we even got past the foyer. Kenny pretended to be disgusted, then wiped his face with the back of his wrist when he thought we weren't looking. The place was emptier than I remembered from the walkthrough. Sun rectangles on the floor, our voices sounding too loud, and also somehow fuller, because the last owner left odd little ghosts behind. A busted plastic flamingo tilting in the side yard. A box of mismatched screws stacked neatly in a baby food jar pyramid in the basement. 3 faded magnets on the fridge, a tomato, which made Cassie bark out a laugh because of course, a chipped lighthouse, and a cartoon bee. The first night we didn't sleep there. We carried over one load, said we'd christen the place with pizza on the floor, and immediately found out the oven didn't heat. We ate out of greasy boxes on the back steps under string lights that didn't actually light and listened to the neighborhood. There's a kid who practices trumpet 2 houses down and a couple who likes to argue about cilantro on their porch at around 7. A big dog barked somewhere and stopped when Kenny whistled back, like even the block was trying to figure us out. I told myself I'd handle the house projects in a sane order. The house laughed. Day 2, I opened the little shed out back to check out the studio Kenny claimed and a bat dropped from the rafters like a leaf having a personal crisis. I ducked, banged my head on the door, and said something that got me a language from Cassie while she was half behind me with her hand on my belt, like she was dragging me out of a haunted cave. The bat blinked at us like we were the problem and then flapped out past my shoulder, clipping my ear with a whisper. Kenny named him Gary and announced we should build him a little bat house, which went straight onto the mental list between fix back step and get rid of the half-dead tiki torch someone cemented into a coffee can. The move itself turned into this weird choreography. The couch got stuck in the entryway and I had to lay on my back and bench press it while Cass and Kenny pivoted like we were reenacting every sitcom ever. Halfway through, the next door neighbor showed up with a plate of muffins and a veil of netting over her face. "Not for you," she said, pointing past me like a general. For the ladies. Apparently we have a beekeeper living on the other side of our fence. Ruth is 70 if she's a day and built like a sunburned sapling. We had no idea we were hosting a small, cranky horde beneath the eaves. She spotted the little swirl of bees exploring our soffit and absolutely lit up. Next thing I knew she was on a ladder in a white suit, coaxing them into a cardboard box like she was taming of the shrew. Kenny watched with his whole body, vibrating. Ruth said we could keep a hive with her help, and Kenny asked me in a whisper if we could plant the sunflowers now. We stopped between boxes and dug a crooked row of seeds along the fence in the half-dried June dirt while Ruth talked bees, and Cass, stubborn and glowing, wrote sun on a tongue depressor and stuck it into the ground like a little flag. There's something about pushing a seed into warm earth that makes your chest feel too big for your ribs. We weren't going to get a dog yet. We said we'd wait until the paint was dry and the rugs were down and the back fence wasn't more optimism than barrier. 2 days later we were at the shelter just to look, and a block-headed gray pit with half an ear and a frosted muzzle stepped out, leaned his whole weight into my legs, and sighed like he'd been holding his breath for a year. Cassie knelt, he put his ridiculous square head in her hands, closed his eyes, and I saw her fall. Kenny covered his mouth and tried not to squeal. His card said his name was Diesel, age around 8, surrendered because moving. We walked him outside and he did a slow circuit of us like he was checking the bolts and then sat on Kenny's foot. That was that. He snored the entire ride home, the heart-shaped air freshener bounced against the windshield like it was nodding approval, and he now follows me from room to room like I'm going somewhere important and he'd better supervise. He has feelings about the vacuum. He has louder feelings about the doorbell. He sleeps in the doorway of Kenny's room like he's on shift and thumps his tail exactly 4 times when I step over him on my way to turn the porch light off. He is already the shop foreman in the garage in my head. Kenny calls him Gasket when he forgets. The big thing, though. The thing that made everything else tilt. Cassie showed up at the shop on Tuesday with a brown bag lunch and that look she gets when she's trying to keep a secret and it's tickling her from the inside. I just finished a brake job and had grease in my thumbnail beds no matter how much I scrubbed. She set the bag down on the bench like it was fragile and told me to open the stupid sandwich first because she didn't want me passing out. The guys in the bay pretended not to stare, which made it somehow worse. The sandwich was turkey, too much mustard because she does that when she's nervous, and under the wax paper there was a tiny onesie rolled up tight and tied with red twine, white, with black letters that read, Pit Crew. Something in my head went white noise. The room narrowed to her fingers, to the way she was biting the inside of her cheek. I knew before my brain caught up. Still, I said, wait, like I could stop time and stretch it out to climb inside. She pulled a stick from her back pocket and set it next to the onesie. 2 pink lines. So faint you'd think the universe was whispering it, and I was shaking, and then I wasn't, because my hand found her waist and she put her forehead against mine and said, hey, like she always does when I go blank. I sat down hard on a stack of tires because I literally forgot how legs worked. She laughed and then cried and then laughed because I was crying into my hands, grease and all, and she kept saying, it's early, I know, and I kept saying, okay, because somehow that word meant everything at once. The boss stuck his head in to yell about who left the compressor whining and then saw Cassie and me in the little shirt and just shook his head and grinned and backed out like he'd walked in on a magic trick. Someone must have told everyone because 5 minutes later the entire shop was banging ratchets on fenders again like a junkyard drumline and my phone was vibrating with exactly 1 million heart messages from her mom. I took a terrible photo of the onesie on my knee and sent it to Ruth. She replied with a bee emoji and a cradle, which is not a combination I saw coming from my HOA-aged neighbor, but okay. We told Kenny that night on the living room floor because we don't own a couch anymore until I figure out how to get the legs off. Cass went first because I didn't trust my voice. She said, we've got one more thing to put in the house, and handed him a box. He opened it like it was going to be a prank. He's my child even if paperwork says otherwise. And when he saw the shirt, when his face tried to decide which emotion to land on, I felt my heart do something that felt dangerously like breaking and healing at the same time. For a second he went completely still, the way he does when he's fighting tears. Then he sucked in a breath, looked at me, and said, for real? Like we were telling him we bought him a spaceship. When we nodded he made a noise I have never heard a human make, some awful squeak sob laugh that took me out. He hugged Cass first, long and hard and careful in a way that made me want to promise the entire world nothing would touch her, and then he hugged me with his face smashed into my shoulder. I'm gonna be the best big brother, he said into my shirt. Like, annoying good. He asked if babies like guitar. He said he'd make a playlist. He asked if this meant we could definitely get a baby monitor with a screen so he could watch him sleep, then caught himself. Or her, he said, cheeks going red. Then he got serious, real serious, and asked if the baby would have my last name. Cass went quiet the way you do when your throat closes, and I told him we'd figure out what fit us best as a family, but that whoever this kid is, they're ours. He nodded like that was the only answer he needed, and then he very solemnly handed me a post-it from the coffee table. He'd drawn a stick figure with a little dot in the middle like an asterisk. He wrote +1 above the roof. We went to the first appointment 2 days later. I've been in a lot of rooms like that in my life if you count exam rooms with busted knees and tetanus shots, but I have never in my life wished I could fight a chair for creaking so loudly under me. Cass squeezed my fingers so hard during the blood draw I got that bright star flash behind my eyes and pretended it didn't happen because I'm very tough. When the tech turned the screen and we heard that sound, like sneakers in a dryer or a train wave hitting your chest, I realized nothing in my life had ever made me feel both terrified and completely sure at the same time. I didn't think I'd be the guy to cry at a grainy blob. I am very much that guy. There was a wrinkle. It's not a fun one, but it's life, and I think it would feel dishonest to pretend it all glides. Kenny's biological dad reached out. He saw a photo someone tagged on Instagram of Cass's ring hand holding a basket of farmer's market strawberries and apparently that punched him in the gut from whatever state he's in now. He texted her, number she didn't recognize, name she did. She showed me the screen sitting at our scarred little kitchen table, her jaw tight. We looked at each other. We agreed on rules in 2 sentences flat. We do this on our terms, in public, and nobody goes alone. We met him at a coffee place in daylight with too many plants. He brought a chip on his shoulder and a 6-month sobriety chip on his keyring. He looked like a version of a life Cass didn't choose anymore. I am not proud of how hard I worked to keep my face polite. He said he wanted a chance to know his son, voice all rough edges. Cass told him calmly that he could start by showing up on time for a coffee with Kenny and that we'd be sitting at the next table if Kenny wanted us there. He glanced at me and then at her hand and flinched like the ring burned. I didn't say much. It wasn't my arena. When he left, Kenny's hand had gone from my forearm to my wrist without my noticing, thumb rubbing a little back and forth like he was smoothing splinters. They met once, for an hour. Kenny came home and sat on the back steps and peeled a label off a bottle of ginger ale and said, "That was weird," with too many syllables, and then put his head on my shoulder without looking at me. I told him it was okay to take his time. I told him none of this shifted anything in my chest. He said he knew. Then he asked if I'd come to his school's end-of-year concert because he had a solo. I told him he couldn't pay me to miss it. If you're wondering how Cass is feeling, the answer is nauseous and feral and perfect. Morning sickness lies. It is not a morning thing. It is when you put your head down thinking you might sleep, surprise thing. I've learned a lot about crackers and ginger and the exact angle you have to tilt a Gatorade so it sounds less like a science experiment at 2 in the morning. I have a pantry shelf that looks like a weird shrine to saltines. Kenny made her a bowl of canned peaches the other night and sat on the bed with her ankles across his lap and spooned them one by one into her mouth like he was feeding a baby bird, and I had to go into the bathroom and take a beat because sometimes when a good thing is happening your chest feels too tight for it. Last night was our first storm in the house. Thunder rolled across the neighborhood in big fat steps and the kind of rain that sounds like applause hammered the porch roof. Diesel planted himself in the hallway between our rooms, confused and indignant and brave. The power flickered and stayed. We lay in bed and the air smelled like wet pavement and tomatoes from a box, even though there aren't any in this kitchen yet. On the fridge, under the tomato magnet from the old place and the bee and the lighthouse, there's the ultrasound printout and a post-it with "Don't chicken out" that's been joined by +1. The heart-shaped air freshener swings in the dark when the air conditioner kicks on with a soft little plastic tap. From down the hall, I could hear Kenny's guitar in the softest version of him, the notes like someone talking from the next room. When he finished, he walked into our doorway with Diesel at his knee, stuck his head in, and said, "Good night, Mom." "Night, Dad," like it had always been that way. This morning I made coffee that tasted like optimism and slightly burned filter. I stepped onto the back stoop barefoot and there, I swear to you, 3 sunflower sprouts had pushed up their tiny fists in the night. I don't know how to build a cradle yet. I don't know how to fix everything that's coming, but I know how to show up, and when the sky cracked open and let the light in sideways, my house smelled like rain and cherry chemical in her shampoo, and I just stood there and let it. We keep adding plates to the table and somehow there's always enough.